All right, guys. I get the honor of closing us out tonight before some Q&A with Curtis and I. But how about our first three speakers? Let's give it up for our first three speakers. What do you think? I'm extremely grateful for Curtis, Matt, and Brandon. They have been super important in my life, in my Cutco career, specifically at events. I've had the pleasure of working with Curtis in the booth a few times. Haven't had the pleasure yet of working with Matt and Brandon, but those three, I hope you guys took some great nuggets from those three. What they are saying, like watching Brandon handle the spouse objection, it's like wizardry, right? It's like he's handled that objection in that way, you can just tell a million times. So I'm extremely grateful for those three people and how great they are. And so today I have the pleasure of talking about calling your shot. So there was this kid that I met, not really a kid, he was 21 at the time, I guess. He was a young adult. That I met 10 years ago back in 2013. And he was at the same college that I was at. And in our senior year, we had this thing where we had to do, our senior project involved essentially like a volunteer part of it. So I remember talking with him after, and he was like, yeah, one of his projects was, I don't know if who here has ever heard of Junior Achievement. Has anybody heard of that volunteer organization? It's great. So essentially, you go work like high school, college kids. You get the opportunity to work with, again, anything from, again, first grade, second grade, all the way up to, again, 9th, 10th graders. Oh, are we okay? Is this fine? Okay. And so I remember him kind of like, it's one of those things as part of the senior project, you kind of just have to break down kind of how it all's, like what your takeaways were and stuff. And one of the things that he said was, he's like, yeah, what's interesting about working with like the 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, his project, they were doing the big question, which is like, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? And he was like, man, these kids are just unapologetically just big dreamers, right? Like doctors, dentists, world famous DJs, like Instagram famous, because that's a thing at 6, I guess now. And like things like the President of the United States, all the crazy things, right? And he was like, all these kids just have these like unapologetically just like, we can do anything in the world, right? And he was like, he kind of caught himself. He was like, I feel like society, you kind of just like, you get older, and then as you get older, like you kind of just like, yeah, all these things are just too far-fetched. Like all these things are just too big, they're too crazy. And society has this tendency to kind of try to push us down as we get older. It's like, yeah, you're not that capable of doing something as insane as being like the President of the United States. And so he asked himself, he kind of caught himself. He was like, yeah, I mean, why can't that be me? And I was like, that's a good takeaway. Why can't you do it, right? Why can't you be the guy that does something awesome? And I remember him telling me, he's like, I'm just going to go make this next 10 years awesome. I was like, that's awesome. And I feel like the next 10 years over his life, I mean, it's kind of interesting how you look at it. Like, I feel like you guys probably have experienced a few of these things this guy went through, right? He went through the days where he tried to swipe his debit card or credit card, and it declined trying to buy groceries. It's a fun time, right? He had the embarrassment of being like, can you swipe it again? Can you, like, try it again? Tried to turn his car key, and just the car didn't turn on, right? It's always fun. And you've already called AAA 4 or 5 times that year, so they're like, yeah, you're going to have to get another tow company to come get you. That's a fun one. He also had wins, right? He graduated college a little after I met him, which was great. He paid off some college debt. He experienced crazy things like heartbreak. He experienced love. He actually won some awards, right? He also fell short of some of his goals after college as well. But he experienced a lot over 10 years. And last year, that 21-year-old, 10 years later, managed to sell $1 million at Cutco in 2023. So if you haven't figured it out, that was me. So this knucklehead, in 2013, he sold $65,000 worth of Cutco knives. I don't think I hit bonus half of those months because I didn't actually hit bonus those months, so I didn't make half. But I scraped by, right? Managed to pay some tuition, managed to pay some rent, keep a couple bucks in my pocket for some weekends at the bars with the boys. But the difference in 10 years of who I was, who I still am, and how I've grown specifically in this business is pretty hard to believe. So I want to start today by this quote, which I think is fantastic. And who here has ever seen a quote they've never seen before, and they see it and they're like, that is an amazing quote. This is an amazing quote. First think, second dream, third believe, and finally dare. So being in Orlando, I found this quote quite fitting, since we're basically in Disney's backyard. So we're going to get to more on that quote in a little bit. So today, again, we're going to talk about call your shots. In other words, basically to say clearly what your intentions are. For those of you who aren't into sports, who here has ever heard of the movie Miracle? Okay, it's one of them, like, talk about getting goosebumps. Every time I think about that movie, I'm just like, oh. So the Miracle on Ice, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, right, it's the story of the U.S. Olympic hockey team in 1980. I get goosebumps every single time I hear the Herb Brooks speech in the locker room before they go and play the Soviets. He says something along the lines that I think that we can apply to our lives, in our daily lives, every single day if we want, which is, if we played them 10 times, they might win 9. But not this game. Not tonight. Tonight, we skate with them. Tonight, we stay with them. And we shut them down because we can. Tonight, we are the greatest hockey team in the world. Right? I think for those of you that watched it, it's not a very good Herb Brooks impersonation. However, the quote is still there. And I think what he does in that speech is he calls his shot to his players. Right? He is calling his shot that he knows that his players have done the work. He knows that they are capable of doing something the rest of the world believes to be impossible. Deep down, the players also know that they're capable. They've put in the work. They've stayed disciplined. They've worked through adversity. They need to show up and do the work that they know they can do. They just have to believe that they can. Fast forward 3 periods later, they beat the Soviets in the semifinal game and go on to win the gold medal. So before we go too deep into today, I want everyone to just take a second. Some of you guys, as Dave earlier said, like some of you guys had your best years ever. Some of you guys did not have your best years ever, and a lot of you guys are kind of in the middle of that. So I want you to take a second to just understand that you are supposed to be in the moment that we're in right now. You are exactly where you're supposed to be right now at NET24. You are supposed to be in this moment in the chair you're in for a reason. So I want you to ease your mind for a second, and I want you to think about that little voice that has been chirping at you for the last year or two. All right? And that little voice has probably been saying something that you probably haven't really wanted to listen to. It's that voice that's deep down scared the bejesus out of you. It's challenging you to think about or do something that stretches what you really truly believe you're currently capable of. But this is that goal that you know if you dug down real deep, you could accomplish this year. Okay, I just want you to take a second. Think about that, whether it's a number, whether it's a fitness goal, whether it's a savings goal, whether it's an investing goal, whether it's a mental health goal. I want you to just take a second and think about that, okay? Now, I also want you to know that this goal is not the goal that you see your buddy next to you writing down, okay? This is not, oh, my buddy put down 500 grand, so I got to put 500 grand down. Or he put $1 million down, so I got to put $1 million down, okay? The purpose of this message is not to set the goal to start bragging, right, about doing something that you're not that serious about, okay? Or you're being peer pressured into putting a number down on paper that is completely out of touch with reality, okay? So I encourage you, using your peers to hold you accountable for this, okay? But once you call your shot, just shut up and get to work, okay? So take a second, write that down. Okay, so I want to applaud you guys for a hot second, writing whatever that thing is that it is down, because you just made it real, okay? Put that bad boy down on paper. So, most people overestimate what they can do and achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. Okay, who here has heard this quote before? Okay, if you guys are familiar with Tony Robbins, he's kind of coined this phrase, but the true original guy I think he's technically a scientist, or computer scientist at Stanford. His name is Roy Amara. Has been linked to this quote as well. Now, what's cool about this is that there's actually science behind this quote, right? It's the science and the power of how progress and discipline compound year over year, right? Who here has ever heard Warren Buffett say the most powerful thing in the world is compounding interest, right? And it's the same exact thing with this quote with your life, okay? If you would have told me 10 years ago that I would sell $1 million in a freaking single year, I'd have told you were nuts. Like, bonkers, are you crazy? But that same year in 2013, I was like, I'm going to sell $100,000 this year. And I've sold $65,000. I sold 35 grand short of what I was like, oh, I got that in the bag, right? I didn't even sniff the number, let alone get close to it, right? But I overestimated what was possible without enough experience, without progress, or even enough discipline, right, to be able to accomplish that $100,000 number 10 years ago. So I truly believe that we have a goal, the goal that speaks to us. It could be a CPO goal or whatever, that truly strikes fear into us. It makes us super uncomfortable. But at the same exact time, that same goal gets us as caffeinated as like 12 cups of coffee. It's provocative. It gets the people going. Right? It's like, oh, let's do this. Right? So tonight's message, I just want to inspire you, but I also want to help create a roadmap for you guys to call your own shot. Okay? So take that shot. Take the shot that you've deep down in your gut really known that you could do, right? But you've always been too scared to commit because you haven't been willing to be vulnerable enough to share with others, or you're just going to inevitably let another year slide by. And I don't want this year to be another year that just slides by for any of you guys, okay? So Napoleon Hill says, whatever the mind of a man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. I freaking love this quote, right? Last year I talked about evolution of CSP habits. Who here was that for that message, or who's heard that message? Okay, great. Okay, so I love giving that message because I think it's a true, honest look of what it takes to grow, right, as a CSP. Right, I remember talking about 100 to 200K reps. We're just freaking ignorance on fire. We're just like, we're on the juice, man. We're just like, knives. Whoa, let's do it, right? It's awesome, but you're just like, how can I cut all the pennies? I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm just going to cut all the pennies. Try to figure it out, right? 300 to 500K reps, right? You're just kind of figuring out how to sell this stuff. You got more discipline. You got some more consistency. You got some more resilience when things get hard, but we're not true masters yet. And then once you get to that $800,000 to $1 million a year shippers, right? These people are truly just operating on a whole nother level. Hearing Matt Graves talk about Cucko Kitchens, and it's like literally you're sitting in your seat like, I just want to give you my credit card, right? Because he's just that good, but he's just so disciplined. It kind of feels like it's art in a way, like you're watching visual art as this person talks to you about kitchen knives, right? So they're so intentional with their words, right? They're just being so in tune with the customer. Like you probably noticed that all three of those guys today, we're not talking about really like the essence of what they're talking about kind of matters, but listen with your eyes first, then your ears. It's like, what? Right? Curtis is just operating on another level that me as a person that was selling $300,000 7 years ago just couldn't even quite understand yet, right? So one thing that I noticed in 2023 that was different than 2022 is in 2023, I was extremely humble and respectful of my goal. Okay, the whatever you just put down on paper, guys, is a big deal to you. Doesn't matter. Nobody else cares, by the way, what that thing is. Nobody cares. You and your CPO are not correlated to how good of a human being you are. That's it. I was telling Josh Muller, shout out to my accountability buddy this year. We were like, holy buckets, $1 million is a lot of freaking cucko in a year. Whew. Right? And Curtis and Matt and Brandon all just make it look easy. And we're just like, Jesus, how are we going to do this? But the whole time, I was like, you know what, Josh? If we don't sell $1 million, I'm going to love you just as much if you sell $1 million. That's it. It doesn't matter. So if you fall short of your goal this year, nobody else cares except you. And that's great, right? It's still super important to be accountable to your own word, right? The importance of having some humble thoughts towards your goal and having some respect, like understand that we're not entitled to anything that we set our mind to. Just because you woke up today does not mean that you're entitled to your next breath, right? And having some respect for appreciating that the goal that you have and understanding the amount of work that it's going to take to achieve it. So I had to respect the $1 million number, right? Literally a handful of reps at that time last year have sold $1 million in a year. So even though I was intentional about how I wanted to have the year to go, I wasn't entitled to that, right? And in 2022, I went in, I was like, well, if everything just goes right, in 2022, then I'll sell $1 million. And then I got hit in the face with some reality and fell $186,000 short of selling $1 million in 2022. Okay? So in order to go after a number that you just put down, whatever that is, you're going to have to do the thing that you've heard before, which is get comfortable being uncomfortable. Who here has heard that phrase before? Especially in Vector, man, I love it. Right? It couldn't have been more true this year. So for those of you who have tackled that bigger, scarier, hairy, audacious goal that you've actually listened to that voice before, it's been nudging you towards that goal, and you've felt it on a spiritual level of like, yeah, I felt stretched. Right? It's going to feel like you're behind the whole time. Like the whole time. Best week ever? Sweet. Do it again. Best day ever. Nice. Do it again next week. All right? So that was my brain the whole year. So here's how it broke down over the last 10 years. Okay? I really hope that for those of you that have sold $100,000 total in your life, or have sold $100,000 last year, or sold $500,000 last year, or you sold $850 last year, I hope that you can take something from this of just being like, you know what? Yeah, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Right? COVID was fun. Right? It was a nice little reality check. So, again, the culmination of 2013, I'm so grateful for my version of myself, 2013. Matthew McConaughey, after his Oscar-winning speech, he talks about how his hero is himself in 10 years. I love that. That was kind of me. Like, I don't think that even 10 years ago I could have even dreamed of doing that. And that's all right. Right? So today what I want to talk about is I really do believe there's 3 steps into achieving a goal and the essence of calling your shot. Okay? And we're going to talk about these 3 things. Okay? Understanding your present situation. Okay? So whatever that thing is that you just put down onto paper, onto your MacBook, or onto your computer, ask yourself a couple questions. What have you sold in the past 2 or 3 years leading up to this year? Like, be honest with yourself. Right? If it's a physical goal, what has led to where you are currently right now in the shape that you're in? Right? What are the things, what is reality right now? Right? Where are you in this journey towards what you just put down? If you haven't had to taken a second to reflect on this thing, write those things down as well. What has actually happened in the last few years? What was your CPO? How many orders did you have? How many of them came at events? How many were your personal past customers? How many were brand new customers? How many were referrals? There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat in this business. A lot of different ways, right? Matt's average order, $1,400 at the booth, inspiring as hell. Mine was not that. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. All right, so currently, where are you? And if you haven't taken the time, by the way, especially if this is a Cutco-related goal that you put down, you have to analyze it. Who here has ever heard of an Ironman? It's the race, okay? I was actually able to see a buddy of mine run his first Ironman this summer, and ironically, it was the same week of the year that I was feeling the most defeated and feeling the most behind on my goal personally. It was the last week of June. We had been 6 months in. I was at $280,000. And I was like, man, we got a lot of Cutco to sell in the next 6 months. I was like, man, oh man. I was like, 6 months. Average 4K days for the next 180 days. That's it. Easy. Not so easy. Right? I was like, Jesus, take the wheel. Here we go. Right? So I was so grateful, though, to support him in that because I was able to see him compete in that Ironman that week. And if you guys don't know what an Ironman is, it's exhausting just to watch it, for crying out loud. You swim 2.4 miles, then you bike 112 miles, and then you run a marathon, and you don't get to break in between, right? You just go forever, it seems like. And you have to do it under 17 hours. If you don't do it under 17 hours, you do not get the Ironman trophy, a.k.a. the medal. And so it was one of the most humbling and inspirational things I've ever seen. Here I am worried about selling $1 million in a year, and I'm like, I can't believe this guy didn't die. I was like, oh my God, right? It was incredible, right? So for a person that wants to run an Ironman, running, again, swimming 2.5 miles, biking 112, running a marathon all in a row, right? You can't just wake up tomorrow and be like, I'm going to go do that just because, right? So you have to be disciplined to building up towards that, right? So recognizing where you're at. Where's my man Roger Rodriguez? Where are you? We got some Roger Rodriguez fans in the house? Keep challenging yourself. Like and subscribe. Okay, you are actually insane. You know this. He celebrated his 31st birthday by running an ultra marathon, so he ran 31 miles on his birthday. I drank a couple beers. It was great. Hold my beer. I'll go run an ultra marathon. Just kidding. No, all seriousness. Roger, you trained for it, right? Yes. Because you can't just wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to go run 31 effing miles, right? That's ridiculous. Right? Most people will never do that. But Roger recognized where his fitness level was at before he decided to go after running an ultra marathon. Right? A little bit more planning went into that than Calendar Club, I feel like. No stress fractures, correct? Correct. Right? So where are you right now in the journey toward your scary, hairy, audacious goal? Right? So take that goal. Let's be real with ourselves for a second. Okay? You know the deep down, that number that's on paper, there is one thing that will be the biggest needle mover this year to move you closer to that goal. Okay, so I want you to take a second. There's probably a gut feeling that's like, that's really scary, but if I did this, I got a shot. What's that thing? Put that down next to your goal. Now, it's also really important to be brutally honest with yourself. Matt, you talked about this earlier. A person's like, can I just implement all of it? And you can try, right? But you have to be real with yourself to respect the process of getting to where you're going. So on a scale of 1 to 10, whatever that one thing is that's like, I know if I got really good at this, that will get me moving closer to where I need to be. 1 is essentially you're incompetent. You don't know what the heck you're doing. A 10 is like, you're a master of this already. You probably should be giving a main message at NET. Okay? Right? If you're at a 10, you probably need a different number 1 or different number 1 needle mover. Okay? So where are you on a scale of 1 to 10 on that thing that you know if you got better at, you'd be able to move closer to your goal? So once you have the awareness of where you are, that leads me to the next step, which is figuring out what it will take, to level up. Okay? What needs to happen next? So once you understand where you're at, you can work on the next step. And the next step is, again, what needs to happen in order for you to get exactly to that next level, especially with that needle mover. Okay, so for example, specifically mine last year is a pretty easy example. It wasn't rocket science last year. It made it also pretty easy for me to take emotions out of the biggest number I'd ever gone for. So Curtis, again, shout out to you. Dude, it's crazy. I'm with Curtis on this 100%, dude. I love working with Curtis because we're just two unemotionally attached humans. We're just like, who cares who's next? They said, no, I don't give a crap. Who's next? And we just give the same level of energy to the next person. Because it literally, by the way, newsflash, doesn't matter what happened to the last customer at all. That next customer doesn't have any idea how that interaction just went. None at all. Right? So for me, I was like, I need to take the emotions as much as possible out of this year because I feel like I'm going to be behind the whole year. So I reflected, beginning of 2023. In 2022, beginning of 2023, excuse me. In 2022, I sold $814,000 on 1,249 orders. So if you just take that, divide that 814 by 1249, it's $650 was the average order that was on my Vector Connect in 2022. Okay? So in order to sell $186,000 extra, I had a few options. First option, create an extra 286 orders if averages stayed exactly the same. The other option is increase my average order $150. So go from $650 average to $800 total on all platforms, from a rep portal order to the single table knife to the kitchen that we sell. Or I could work on both, right? Getting more orders and also increasing my average order. So my one thing last year was 2 parts. One, I knew I physically had to be in the field more. I just had to work more often last year, okay? And the second thing for me was selling more packages, specifically cookware. It's not rocket science, okay? I didn't sell 286 orders extra I also did not grow my average order to $800 last year, but I created an extra 132 orders last year, and I increased my average order from $650 to literally exactly $100, which is crazy, to $750. And voila, $1,035,000 and some change, right? So the little things that I did within my cookware script is I recorded myself. I was more proactive about giving cookware messages, because by giving more messages, I had to get better at selling cookware. And so I noticed that my discipline of hearing myself talk about cookware and then re-scripting my approach, the tedious details, this allowed me to help customers experience cookware in the same fashion that we experienced selling an Ultimate, which I felt very comfortable with. So we talked about this at our events meeting last week, and a few of our team members actually committed to some small, simple daily actions that they know they're going to help them. Shout out to my guy, Jared Erickson. He said he's going to commit to looking or practicing a script every day this year. And I love that, right? For me, this is the year of health. I got a bum shoulder for those of you that are on my team, right? And I've started every day this last few weeks with some intentionality behind little things that I know can compound. Like the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've drinking 10 to 20 ounces of water first thing, right? And I've been back in the habit of stretching every single day for at least 2 minutes at a time. Not big things, but for me to get to my goals health-wise this year, I know that if I do those things every single day, things are going to compound, and I'm going to be healthier, specifically, again, inside, but also physically on the outside next year. So what is that thing for you? I bet that these small intentional habits that you set towards that needle mover specifically will compound every single day this year that will help that needle mover move you closer to your goal. And you will just have this upward trajectory the whole year. It will be small every single day, but you will notice by the end of the year how big of a difference it makes. So what is one small daily action that will compound over the next 330 days that by the end of 2024 will help you move closer to the 10 on that scale of 1 to 10? So who do you need to talk to? What do you need to practice? Right? What do you need to be more disciplined in? I promise you this, you will not be as good at selling Ultimates as Matt Graves next year. But that's because Matt has treated selling Ultimates like his Mona Lisa. Literally. Okay? Michelangelo said, every block of stone has a statue inside of it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it. Matt has simply done the work to get really effing good at selling Ultimates. Right? And I'm so grateful for Matt and his intentionality behind it because it's inspiring. It's transformed, and he's transformed that sculpture, or that stone, into a sculpture of selling a lot of Ultimates. So this brings me lastly to think about how it's all going to feel when it's all done. Okay? Begin with the end in mind. I thought of an embarrassing amount of times last year of how good it's going to feel when I hit $1 million. I thought about it all the time. And when it finally happened, I cried like a little baby. Shout out to my customers, Mark and Jennifer Yeager. Low-key really happy that it happened at my house on a phone call and out of the booth, because it would have been embarrassing to cry at the booth. But I got to hang up and cry. It was great. But I had to fight through doubts the whole entire year, just in my head of failing, falling short, not following through with what I said I was going to do. Right, so I ask you, when times get really hard this year and the momentum is swinging backwards, what can you do to lean into activity? What can you do that moves that pendulum swing into the positive direction? I know I said this on a podcast recently with Brett Wiggins, but I felt like this year I was literally just an arrow getting pulled back in a bow, like the whole year. And I was just waiting to get thrust forward. And there were so many times where I fell flat on my face, but I got back up because I knew that good things were around the corner if I just stayed committed to the activity. So your goal this year is going to challenge you in a physical, emotional, and spiritual way that you literally never thought you could be challenged so far in. But if you keep the end in mind and think about how good it will feel to reach the summit, it's going to feel like bliss when you finally achieve it. Now, Michelangelo also has another quote that's actually more famous, which is, if people knew how hard I worked for my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all. And I think that's a really sad quote, to be honest. I challenge that quote by admiring who a person becomes in the process of mastery. The discipline they develop, the skills that they craft, the mental toughness that they gain by continuing to work when it's not all sunshine and rainbows. That is what calling your shot is about. Right? You're committing to be the person you need to be to achieve the goals that you have and the dreams you have. So I want to finish with this Disney quote because I think there's a lot of substance in each of these little, very small sentences. First, think, there's a power in awareness. There's a power in numbers and data. There's a power in understanding what needs to happen for you to go after your goal. Second, dream. What is really possible if you really went after something that scares the crap out of you? Have you ever experienced something in your life where you didn't really believe that you had earned something? Right? That you may be holding something back from truly allowing yourself to dream that next big dream. Matt and Brandon made this, again, quote famous, I think 4 or 5 years ago now. It's like, release limitations. Like, what are you truly capable of? How big can you dream? Third, believe. There's no reason to have a plan B because it just distracts from plan A. Will Smith made that famous. Right? In May of last year, guys, I had no idea how $1 million was going to come together, but I put in work every single day to move that needle. Right? So put the time in to generate more CPO. Just do it. Is it pretty? Absolutely not. I drove 34,000 miles last year. 34,000. Had a lot of time to myself to think. Right? So did I have to pivot? Yes, a lot. There were a lot of things that didn't go exactly as I had planned, but I was willing and open to believing in something that was so big that it didn't matter if something didn't go the way I planned it to. I just figured out how to create more. And finally, dare. Finally, Disney says to dare. Go after it. Go after it. Why not you? Why can't this be your time? Why can't this be the year that you go out and call your shot? So this is your time. Thank you.